Hello students, today we are going to do another poem which is very important and it is in your course. This poem is by Andrew Marvell, Thoughts in a Garden. Now Andrew Marvell is a poet who was born in 1621 and he was very close to Milton, and therefore we can see that Milton has a lot of influence on Andrew Marvell's poetry. He was a Puritan and he was an admirer of Cromwell. He was a devout reader of the Bible and he was also a supporter of the joyless regime after the execution of Charles I. But his private voice, which is revealed in his poem, it is bright, humorous, tolerant and civilized. He is a lover of the garden. Now his political career does not influence his poetic career. His satires and his controversies, though he indulged in that a little bit, but they are now forgotten, and he is now known for his fanciful poems, and especially for his poem Thoughts in a Garden, which it actually foreshadows Keats by the sensuousness. You can find Keats' sensuousness in the garden, and you can find the dedication or the worship of Wordsworth, and the poem is full of optimistic and meditative mood. He expresses himself with liveliness, with happiness, and therefore he can be ranked one of the greatest poet as far as nature poetry is concerned. Now this poem Garden, it talks about actually three types of garden. Now these three types of garden, it tells us about the real love for nature of the poet, and it tells us about in the first half he tells us about the physical garden, then he goes on to talk about the mental garden, and then the poet goes on to talk about the spiritual garden. So Andrew Marvell, he proceeds with a simple premises. He takes us to the golden age of innocence, of happiness, and he says this happiness and this innocence can be found only in the garden. The poem has a quality of Wordsworth, where the poet is worshipping garden. Then it also has the quality of sensuousness, which tells us about Keats, but Wordsworth and Keats came in the later age, that is the Romantic age. The poet actually is pained to see that people have no time to enjoy the beauty of nature. We struggle very hard to win glory in the different spheres of life, but that labor is really of no importance, because eventually we are awarded with the leaves that grow in the garden. So the poet says that without struggling all your life, having no mental peace, and yet we are awarded with the leaves of the garden. So it is better to live in a garden, enjoy your life and enjoy all the leaves together. Then the poet goes on to say that he searched for quiet and innocence in men's company, but it was in vain. And then in the end he realizes that he can get them only in the solitude of a garden, because human society is very rude in comparison to the society of the natural beauty found in a garden. Then the poet also, he says that the beauty of the garden is such that, it is more than the beauty of anybody's beloved. And therefore he says those lovers are foolish who cut the names of their beloved in the bark of the trees, because he would never do so. And even if he had to do so, he would carve the name of the tree on the tree. Then the poet, talks about the mythology, and he says that even Apollo and Pan god, they ended their love in the trees and in the plants, where Apollo chased Daphne, and Pan god was the god of nature, pursued Syrinx, and in the end they were changed into laurel trees and the bamboo. Then the poet talks about a tropical garden, where the sensuousness of the Keats comes into limelight. He finds ripe apples, clusters of vine, nectarian peach. He's stumbling on the melons. He is actually intoxicated with the smell of the flowers, and he's so intoxicated that he falls on the grass. So till here we have Marvell's an idea of the physical garden. Then the poet Marvel, who's a metaphysical poet, comes into force, and he says now that he is enjoying amongst the objects of nature, but he also feels a presence of the divine spirit in nature. His mind is purified and it is rendered holy, and it rises above the common earth and the materialistic world, and it forms images of the other world, which is exactly like the physical world. Then the poet wants to become one with nature. He forgets all the worries of the world. He identifies himself with the various objects of nature. He finds himself sitting like a bird and singing the joys of nature, and leaving his physical body in the garden. His soul becomes a bird and flies towards heaven. Then the poet talks about the Garden of Eden. He says that God had blessed Adam with two paradises in one. The first was the Garden of Eden, and the second paradise was the bliss of solitude. But since Adam was a human, and therefore he could not handle his destiny, could not handle so much joy, and therefore he asked for Eve, and the solitude was destroyed. Then in the end, the poet, in the last stanza, the poet, he gives God the quality of a gardener, and he says that the most beautiful and the cleverer gardener in this world is God, who has made this whole world like a garden. And he actually, he compares this whole earth to a sundial, and he says that the seasons and the 12 months of the year has been divided very beautifully according to the seasons of the honey and the flowers. So God is the most beautiful and the most skillful gardener he has ever come across. Now we'll start with the first stanza, where the poet says, "How vainly men themselves amaze to win the palm, the oak or base." Now here the poet talks about the nature's beauty, and he says that men are so foolish, they are so stupid that they are actually working very hard, they are working ceaselessly. And what they are winning? They are winning the leaves of the palm tree, the oak tree, or the bay tree. What they are getting in return? A crown made of the leaves of the palm, oak, or bay trees. Now, the palm tree was actually in the Greek mythology, the palm tree, a crown of the palm tree was given to the person who was very brave. The oak tree, crown of the oak tree leaves was given to a person who was very good in politics, and the base or the laurel crown was given to a person who was very good in poetry. So eventually, how much soever you work hard in this world, eventually you are going to be awarded with the leaves of the trees. And their incessant labor see crowned with some single herb or tree. He says that the incessant means the unending hard work. Labor means the hard work of the human beings. They are awarded with the crown made of a single herb or a tree, whose short and narrow words shade does prudently their toils are bright. Now he says that the crown which is made of some single herb or tree, these leaves, they are very short, they are very narrow, they are not very broad, but what they are doing? They are actually, prudently, very, very wisely, they are giving, they are crowning, or they are awarding the work of the human beings with a crown. A braid means the crown which is made of those single herb or tree. While all flowers and all trees do close to weave the garland of repose, he says on the other hand, there are trees growing so thickly, so plentifully in the garden. There are so many flowers which are growing in the garden, and what you can do is you can actually go and spend your time in the garden, and they will provide you with delightful shade. You can take rest in them, you can enjoy in them. So within the gardens, enjoying the natural sight is much more rewarding and pleasing to the soul. Nature is more beautiful and delightful, and we can get more pleasure out of a visit to a garden than any other worldly activity. So why men are actually working ceaselessly while they are being awarded with leaves of the tree or a flower. Okay, now we'll go to the second stanza. The poet says, fair quiet have I found thee here, and innocence thy sister there. Now, fair here, this is a personification of quiet. Quiet means peace, and innocence. Innocence means, a soul or a heart which is devoid of any sin. He says that for a long time he is being searching peace and innocence, which are supposed to be the sisters, and since they live together, if you're innocent, you have peace of mind, and you have peace of mind only when you are innocent. So he has been looking for them in the company of men. He says, mistaken long I sought you then in busy companies of men. So he had been looking for them in the companies of men, but it is in vain. Why? Because you cannot find peace and innocence in the busy company of men. If peace and innocence can at all be found on this earth, they can only be found in nature. Your sacred plants, if here below, only among the plants will grow. So these sacred plants that are peace and innocence, if ever they are found on this earth, they can only grow among the other plants. Society is most unsuitable, almost it is barbarous by comparison with solitude. So if one wants to enjoy solitude and quiet, you can only seek them in a garden. So the poet says that the garden provides men with such happiness as it is never experienced by him. By comparison with solitude of the garden, human society appears to be barbarous, and therefore peace and innocence can only grow in nature among the plants. Society is a soil which is not congenial, where the peace and the innocence can grow. Now in the third stanza, which occurs, he says, no white nor red was ever seen so amorous as this lovely green. Now the poet, he uses some words which foreshadows Keats' sensuousness, and he says, no white nor red. Now these are the colors of the flowers. He says, no white color or no red color, which is not the color of a flower, which is not found on the flower. No white, no red color is as beautiful, as amorous as this lovely green of the trees. So to marvel the green color of the trees and the leaves is the most beautiful and lovable of all colors, whether it is white or red. Now the green color suggests innocence, freshness, naturalness, and the power of growth. Therefore nothing should be done to disfigure it. He says, fond lovers means foolish lovers, cruel as their flame. They are as cruel as their love, because they cut in these trees their mistress's name, because they carve in the trees, in the bark of the trees, the names of their beloved. They are hurting the trees. They are foolish because they are cruel. They are foolish because they think that the beauty of their beloved is more than the beauty of the trees, and they are cruel because they are cutting the name of their beloved on the bark of the trees. So by doing so, they think that they are showing great love for their beloved, but they are unaware of the fact that the trees in the garden are more beautiful, more lovable than the beauty of their beloved. Little alas they know or heed how far these beauties her exceed. The poet feels sorrowful. He says, alas, they means the foolish lovers, neither do they know nor they do agree that the beauty of the trees is much more than the beauty of their beloved. The poet is grieved to see this foolishness of the lovers. And he says, fair trees. So now he's personifying the trees. He actually addresses the trees. He says, beautiful trees, wheresoever your box I wound, no name shall but your own be found. So he's grieved, and therefore he says that if ever I write the name of the tree, it would not be other than, I would not write the name of my beloved, it would be no other than the name of the tree itself. Thank you.